Hi guys, welcome to the session. We're going to make a start in a couple of minutes. I think there's just a few others to join. And as you are aware, this session's being recorded. So if anybody has any concerns in relation to that, then just drop me a direct message. But otherwise, we will make a start in literally a couple of seconds. Let's get the last few people in. Okay then, so first and foremost, welcome to this session. Thank you for taking your time out, guys. It is the starting off as a self-employed / locum pharmacist with Pharmacy Foundations. If I can just kindly request everyone to ensure that they are on mute throughout the session. If you do have any questions, feel free to use the raise hand functionality as well as the chat box as well. So you can use the chat section to raise any queries or questions that you might have. So some of you might have met me before. My name's Atif. I'll introduce myself shortly. And I'm joined today by Jess as well. And Jess will also introduce herself shortly. This session is running from 11 o'clock all the way through to 12 o'clock. And like I say, do make sure that you are engaging with us using the chat functionality and or raising your hand. Just so I know that the chat functionality is working okay, can I just get some comments in the chat? Maybe some smiley faces or comments to tell me how excited you are to be waking up so early on a Sunday morning. Let's see if that comes through for me. If you can. Perfect. Thank you ever so much, guys, for that. So without further ado then, a brief introduction on Pharmacy Foundations, and then I'll introduce myself and also introduce Jess. So Pharmacy Foundations then, as many of you are already aware, we are an independent training organization, and we do work with a number of different reputable organizations as well in relation to our offerings. So we have our undergraduate, foundation, and postgraduate programs. There's a lot more for the postgraduate to come in the next few weeks and months. So I will advise for you to ensure that you are following us on social media and that you are in the relevant WhatsApp groups. And these are just some images. Some of you might recognize yourselves, in fact, for some of the sessions that we've been doing in the recent past. But yes, do make sure you check us out on the social media platforms for further info. So a little bit about the team. Pharmacy Foundations, we consist of almost 16 pharmacists. Some of them are camera shy. They've not sent in their pictures. That's why they're not on the slide. But almost 16 pharmacists working up and down the country from a variety of different backgrounds. Like I say, today it's going to be myself, Atif Saddiq, and I work as a portfolio pharmacist across Pharmacy Foundations as the head of education, but also as an advanced practitioner in general practice, assistant professor at the University of Bradford. And then you'll also be aware that I'm working with NHS England as a training program director for foundation training. And like, you might recognize some of the other faces on this screen here. So that's me in a nutshell. I'm not going to bore you because a lot of you are aware that I can talk for ages and ages and ages. So I'm going to stop there. And I'm going to hand over to Jess, who's also joined us today. And I think most of you are here, in fact, to hear from Jess rather than to hear from myself. But over to yourself then, Jess.
Oh, hi. Thank you for that, Atif. So my name is Jessica. I'm a chartered accountant. I've been working at Isaacs for the last 17 years. I'm the client manager. So I handle a variety of clients in the healthcare sector, hospitality sector, manufacturing sector, and we deal with small one-man band limited companies right up to multi-million-pound businesses. So we really can handle anything and everything, really. That's me.
Perfect. And with Jess, obviously she works, like she says, with a number of different clients up and down the country. And the key thing today, guys, is the benefit of today's session is we're going to have a very different approach to some of the other sessions that you might have attended, because I'll be able to give you a bit of a lowdown, because some of you are probably thinking, shall I work self-employed? Shall I not? What are the benefits? What are the risks, etc.? So I can give you a very good overview from a pharmacy perspective, but when Jess comes onto the call later on, she'll certainly be able to answer some of the more technical questions and things that, to be fair, I wish that I knew when I qualified initially. or even in the first few years of making that jump from being employed to self-employed, etc. So that's the benefits that Jess is going to have. I think she's kind of undersold how good of an accountant she is, but you'll hear from her hopefully later on in the session. And thank you ever so much for that introduction, Jess.
Thank you.
Righto then, guys. So before we start, last couple of things then. Social media, do give us a follow or a like if you want to be kept up to date with all of our developments. We are on, I'm going to say Twitter, but it's called X now. So we're on X, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. So do make sure you give us a follow or a like. And the other thing that I wanted to draw your attention to is WhatsApp support groups. We have a range of WhatsApp support groups, and the way we've done it is we have organized them so that people are in cohorts for when they qualified. Because I know sometimes you end up getting lots and lots and lots of junk mail, things that might not be relevant to you either because you qualified, way in advance or because you're not as qualified at this stage. So the WhatsApp support groups, we've broken down into different year groups. So if you want to join and want to be kept up to date with any of our developments, just drop us a message on social media or email in and we can add you to the correct WhatsApp support group. Okay then, so before I then go into a bit of detail about employed versus self-employed, I just wanted to check who we have on the call today. So I've got a couple of polls that I would like to share with you all. And hopefully you'll be able to access this regardless of what device you are using. And the first poll should hopefully pop up on your screens in the next few seconds. And I just want to know how long you've been qualified for. And that, will allow myself and Jess to be able to tailor the session more so to your needs. So if you can just kindly have a look at that question, just select the response that applies to you the most, and then press that submit button. So I've got majority, if not all of you actually, who have answered the poll. So I'm going to end that there. Fantastic. And share the results with you all so you can see that. So the question was, how long have you been qualified? And it seems like majority of you have been qualified for, just under 6 months or 0 to 6 months, which is great because I think, to be fair, this is the perfect time for you to be taking the kind of advice and the kind of discussions that we're going to have today on board. Because you don't want to get in trouble with the tax man, nor do you want to be in a situation where you've missed out on some of the benefits and the perks of deciding what you want to do early on. So thank you ever so much for engaging with that poll. Let me ask you another question then. So I know that most of you are have been qualified, in fact, for 0 to 6 months. So I'm going to do another poll, and I'm going to see what your current employment status is. And that will also give us a very good idea of what we're doing currently and who's doing what, etc. So this question asks us, how would you best describe your current employment? And it should have said status, and it should have had a question mark at the end, but nevertheless, go ahead and select your response. If you're a bit confused, just write confused in the chat. We understand sometimes these kind of things can be tricky. But go ahead and let's see what you say. And I'm going to end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So let's see what we have with that then. So how would you best describe your current employment status? And it seems like we've got a very good mixture of responses. Majority tend to fall under the locum part-time category, but there are quite a lot of you that are full-time employed, etc. And so also some of you are locum full-time as well. Fantastic. Thank you ever so much. Gives us some really vital information. So stop sharing that and let's go ahead and dive into a couple of slides that I put together. And this is just me trying to make things easy for me to explain so that you guys can understand as well. And the first slide that I've got put together is this bit here on employed versus self-employed. Now, some of you will already have a very, very good idea of what the difference is between the two. I know some of you will be watching this video later on YouTube. So regardless, let's just have a look at what, if you were to whack it into Google or if you were to look on the gov.uk website, what kind of responses would this question churn out? So, for example, if somebody asks, what is the difference between someone who is employed versus someone who is self-employed? Technically and generally speaking, the kind of responses you get for employed is if you work with someone, or if you work for someone and do not have the risks of running a business. Generally speaking, that would be the definition of employed. So you might be working with, for example, a community pharmacy chain. You work for them. You don't have risks of running the business. So, for example, you're not worried about overhead costs or bills. You're not worried about things like staffing costs, etc. Although that might be part of your performance measures. If you're a manager, you might be in a position where you have to hit certain targets with regards to turnover of work, rate of work, etc. But generally speaking, you do not have the risks of running a business. And then in relation to self-employed, so what's the difference? Self-employed is a person who, if they run their business themselves, usually that's the category they fall under. So they tend to run the business themselves and they take the responsibility for its success or failure. So I can give you a good example of that, in fact, is myself and Pharmacy Foundation. So as you guys, most of you on the call, I recognize quite a lot of the names, in fact, from today, are aware that we set up Pharmacy Foundations back in 2018. So technically, when I'm working with Pharmacy Foundations, I'm self-employed because I, run the business for myself and my business partner, and I take the responsibility for its success or failure. So generally speaking, if you're unsure whether you're employed or self-employed, that might be a way of getting you to think which of the two you fall under. Now, I know Jess's brain is probably turning, the wheels are turning, the cogs are turning for her to say, actually, well, there's this bit and that bit. I'm going to come to Jess about the technicalities of employed versus self-employed in a few moments. But I just wanted to highlight a few other things from a pharmacy point of view. So employed versus self-employed, I thought it'd be worthwhile for you guys to see what kind of benefits there are for being employed and what kind of benefits there are for being self-employed. So on the left-hand side of your screen, employed benefits. So the kind of things and the kind of reasons why a lot of people choose to be employed are listed there on the left-hand side, bottom part of the screen. So the kind of things that you'll get if you were employed by a business, then include things like paid annual leave. So you get a certain amount of holidays. There's a legal requirement of minimum amount of holidays you can or should have within the year. But some employers might be a bit more generous, etc. So paid annual leave, often paid sickness, often the employer tends to pay into a pension pot of some sort. So that's one of the key benefits of being employed. The other thing as well is it's a safety net. So if you were, for example, working as a self-employed person, there's nothing stopping the owner of the business for whom you are working as a self-employed person for to say to you, actually, we don't need you next week, or we don't need you the week after. So the benefits of being employed is you've got that safety net. The other thing with regards to being employed is the regular income. So often people tend to work contracted hours, and with them contracted hours, they will receive a set amount of income that might help them plan a little bit better for their future, etc. And then sometimes, depending on where you are working, there might be a structure for career progression. You might be put onto some sort of pathway, a course, etc. But that doesn't say that all of these points that are mentioned here on the left-hand side are exclusive to being employed. They are just some of the benefits. And to be fair, you could have similar benefits for being self-employed. It just depends on how you structure your self-employed business. So that's employed. Self-employed then, what are the kind of benefits of being self-employed? So you have the independence of choosing how you work, when you work, what kind of hours you work. You've got that kind of freedom with regards to that choice of working hours, working patterns, etc. The other side of freedom is you can also, venture out into a number of different avenues. You don't have to be, stuck within one job or one role. And as you guys are aware, the portfolio pharmacist kind of landscape is becoming more and more of a popular one where people don't want to just have the one job. So it gives you the freedom for you to be able to explore that. Also, element of flexibility as well. Being self-employed, You can be flexible. Often, if you want to go on a holiday at the cheaper time of the year where it's not school holidays, you've got that flexibility. You can do what you want when you want. You also have the flexibility, for example, if you want to attend a conference and you're thinking to yourself, hold on a sec, that, you know, is on so-and-so day, I could be in at work, but I'm my own boss kind of thing. So I can just go ahead and book into that. So you have that element of flexibility as well. Higher earning potential. Often when you tend to be self-employed, you are going to provide a service to a business. Usually it might be during an emergency. So if it's a locum shift when somebody's off sick or somebody's on maternity leave, then you have the potential to not necessarily select how much you're going to get paid for, but to be able to barter, to be able to negotiate. So you have that higher earning potential when you're dealing with the contractor themselves. But in addition to that, because you are self-employed, you could also have the benefit to offset some of the costs by, being a bit more efficient with your, with your taxes, with, expenses, etc. There's quite a lot of different things on that side as well. And depending on, what your outlook on a working/work-life balance is, you can get that better work-life balance because you're your own boss, so you can prioritize what you want to prioritize. For example, one of the things that I like doing, waking up super early, going to the gym, getting back and starting work for about 10 o'clock. That's my thing. I like doing that. And I can do that on the days that I'm self-employed because I have, the opportunity and the potential to be able to do that. So that is basically employed versus self-employed. I'm going to briefly pause there. Because we've got Jess on the call anyway, there's no need for us to just wait until like 11:30 and see what she says, because I was hoping to kind of bring her in on the second half of the session. But would you say, Jess, I've kind of summarized that okay? Is there anything further that you'd like to add at this stage for this particular part of the session?
Yeah, you've got some of the key points there. I think it's more in terms of once you decide, yes, you want to be self-employed as a locum, then you can discuss then going, whether you want to do that via a limited company, via a sole trader, partnership, etc. So they're the different options that would then go into that further, which would then be your tax savings, and how you actually run your business and extract your business. But they are the key benefits in terms of employment, the self-employment.
Perfect. So some of the things that Jess mentioned there included a sole trader, included a partnership, included a limited company. Now, if you guys are thinking, what on earth does that mean? Stick with us because we're going to go into a bit more detail, but just make a note of them in the background if you've got a pen or something similar, because I guess them are the nuances that we need to try and understand when we're trying to decide what it is that we are wanting to do. But yeah, thank you ever so much for that, Jess. So the next thing that I'm going to briefly touch on is a question that a lot of people have. And you might have kind of had this question when you were filling in the poll earlier on as well. And that question that I get from students, newly qualified pharmacists, people that have been qualified for many years is, can I be employed and self-employed? Because to be fair, the list that you brought up on the previous slide, I like a bit of both. I like what you said on the left-hand side, and I also said what you like on the right-hand side. So can I do both? And the question that obviously, like I say, people will ask is, can I be employed and self-employed? The answer to that question is a big fat yes, definitely, 100%. You can be employed, you can be self-employed. And to be fair, in situations like this is where people like Jess tend to earn their money because, you can either be self-employed purely, you could be employed purely. But when you're employed and self-employed, although the answer is yes, then it can start getting very complicated for the average pharmacist to start thinking, well, what does that mean for pension? What does that mean for taxes? But people like Jess are a godsend because they'll be able to come in and be able to advise you exactly what that means. And they'll be able to ensure that, you're on the right kind of tax brackets and codes and things as such as well. So the answer is yes. And I'll give you an example for myself. So I'm not going to dwell too much onto this. So can I be employed? Can I be self-employed? Yes, you can, because I do pretty much that. And this is what I look like on a typical week. So I am employed, I am self-employed, and I've got a combination. And I work very closely with Jess, because Jess is my accountant, in fact, work very closely with Jess to ensure that all the right kind of things are going on at the right kind of time. So if you were to look at my working week, bottom left-hand corner of the screen, I work across a number of different settings, like I mentioned before. On a Monday, I work self-employed in a general practice setting. So all of that money tends to go into a business account. So when I'm doing my shifts, I put through an invoice at the end of the month. That goes into something that we call a business account, which Jess will explain in a few more moments what that means and what a business account is. So all that money goes into a business account, that's self-employed. Following on from that, on a Tuesday, I work with NHS England. I'm actually employed by NHS England. So all of that money goes directly into my personal account. And I get taxed for that through NHS England. I've got a pension set up with NHS England. Hunky-dory, happy days. That's that on a Tuesday. On a Wednesday for me is a buffer day because I've got all of these different hats that I wear. So I tend to do things like my pharmacy foundations, my Medicare. So you guys might have come across Medicare as an independent community pharmacy chain. I tend to look after their pre-regs. And some of the RPS training. I tend to do a lot of this stuff on my buffer day as well as on the Sunday. And a lot of that, again, is self-employed. So all of that money goes into my business account. And on Thursday and a Friday, I work with the University of Bradford. That is employed. All that money goes into my personal account, and I tend to pay my taxes, pension, etc. So that's what I look like on a general week. There are other things, for example, clinical research, which kind of falls in with my GP role, again, self-employed, etc. So the answer to, like I said, the question before is yes, you can be employed and self-employed. And there's no, issues with that. And you can obviously decide how you go ahead and plan your career and what kind of things you do with that. So that's enough from me. I'm going to just briefly pause on the next slide, and I'm going to hand over to you guys, in fact, to see so far with you absorbing all of that knowledge, hopefully, or all of that info. Have you guys got any questions or queries? And feel free to raise your hand if you want to jump onto the microphone instead. If you're a slow typer like me, you might want to do that. Any questions at this stage? Look. So, stunned silence so far. If no questions, just tell me that you're still following me. Put me a comment into the chat to say they're still alive, awake, and kicking. At least I know that you're there. Perfect. Thank you for that. Right, okay, so no questions yet. I'll let you absorb that. Last few points from me then, some top tips, and then we're going to have a discussion with Jess. So some of you guys might be at a certain stage of your career now that you've obviously qualified. You're thinking, well, what do I do next? How do I ensure that I get the right kind of career progression, and what kind of things do I need to consider to set the right kind of goals? Because I do want a portfolio career, or I do want to be a really good community pharmacist, or I do want to work in hospital. A lot of you guys will have your own aspirations and your own ways of wanting to progress. So I'm just going to round off with a couple of quick wins that I think you should be aware of. So first and foremost, if you are still deciding, if you're still in that position where you're not too sure what to do with yourselves, first quick win I would say is invest in yourselves. That's both financially and time-wise. If you are wanting a portfolio career, or if you're wanting a career and you've got certain goals, if you're not investing in yourselves, nobody else is going to invest in you. So you just need to make sure you take out the time. You've got a bit of a buffer day like I have, where you've got an opportunity to read up on things, etc. Second thing is remove any barriers. So ensure that everything, for example, if you're working as a locum, or if you're working in whichever role, all your training is up to date. If you're worried about being on the wrong side of the tax man or woman or person, and you're thinking, oh, actually, am I doing the right kind of thing? Make sure all your barriers are out of the way. Get signed up to an accountant straight away if you're a self-employed person. The other thing that you can do is keep informed about the sector that you are working with. I tend to do a lot of reading on articles and networking, and reading up on newsletters through the PJ or Pharmaceutical Journal, which is a full term for the PJ, in fact, RPS, etc. So just make sure you're signing up to all of that kind of stuff. And obviously make sure you have your CV up to date, and make sure that you are, regularly keeping an application portfolio, that you can refer back to as well. So these are just some generic quick wins that you need to be aware of. I can elaborate on these either later on today or on a different call. But like I say, we're here to talk to Jess. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and Jess and I are going to have a conversation in relation to accounting, etc., and what you guys should be aware of. So far, Jess, we've talked about employed, we've talked about self-employed, And I am going to try and use this opportunity now to kind of put myself in the shoes of the majority of the people that are on the call. Because as you will remember, Jess, most of them said they were qualified 0 to 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah, which is brilliant. That's exactly what we wanted to discuss today. So you've all joined at the right time to be able to make the right decision, and take the right steps now before it's too late.
Perfect. So, yes, I've qualified. Let's just say most of these guys are 0 to 6 months. Most of them would have qualified either 1st of August, 15th of August, maybe even the 1st of September. Yeah. So, literally over the last couple of months, these guys will have qualified. So, if I'm a pharmacist and I've registered, I obviously need to make my mind up if I want to work employed or self employed.
Yeah.
And about that, is there any advice from your side, or is that more so down with the individual?
Yeah, so obviously it is up to the individual, and you did share some good valid points on the key points of being employed versus self-employed. I think it depends on what the individual is used to. So some people are fresh out there, they're scared, they don't know what to do. Being a locum, they're going to be seeing various different companies, different people, different policies, different procedures. Whereas if you're employed, you've got, consistency, they know what they're doing, they know what they're going into every day. So some people like that comfort. Some people are scared to go out there and approach different businesses. It's also scary in terms of where are they going to get their work from locuming. So I don't know if that's something that you can advise them on as well, in terms of, if there's companies out there that can help them with their locum shifts, for example. That's something, if they're completely new to it, they don't know where they're going, what they're doing. If they've got somebody to help them source their locum shifts. Also, usually it would mean that you can charge a higher rate if you are doing different companies locuming, because it's usually emergencies or when they really do need a locum, so they can take advantage of those higher rates there. So once they've decided, right, yes, I do want to do locuming, or maybe as a lot of them are part-time, they've got that security there, but now they really want to build the finances up, build their investments up for the future, then that's when they choose locuming. So the key thing, once they've decided, yes, I want to be a locum, I want to go ahead and do this, then they have to look at, how do I do it? So as you already said, self-employed is the way to do it. However, there's two different options of being self-employed locum. So you can either be a self-employed and pay your taxes via self-assessment, or you can actually be a limited company. So I'm not sure how many of the people on the call have heard of a limited company or are even aware of it. So I'll go very basic to begin with. So a limited company would be a separate legal entity, and you'd create your limited company on Companies House. So you'd have a separate company with company number, and it'd be available online on the Companies House register. Once you've got that limited company, that is a separate entity to the individual. So you've got to treat it as a separate business. So you'd have to open up a separate business account with your bank. So a lot of people ask us, which bank do I go with? Where do I go for the bank? So for that, I definitely recommend you go with either your current banker, because they've already got that relationship with you, they know about you, so you'll be able to find it a lot easier to open a business account. Or a lot of people find the online platforms, so Starling, Tide, those banks are a lot easier to gain access. If you're working as well as locuming, you might find it difficult to go into the bank, into branch, set up the business account. So those are very flexible, and we find a lot of clients now are turning to those. So once you've opened your business bank account, then you're ready to go. So I don't know how you want me to go. Do you want me to explain differences in
Yeah,
tax?
I mean, so far there's quite a lot of stuff that you mentioned there, Jess.
Yeah.
I'm going to maybe touch on a couple of the points with you.
Yeah.
And I'll also keep an eye on the chat, because obviously there are questions coming through. And thank you ever so much, first and foremost, by the way, for that kind of background. So, Jess, one of the things that you mentioned was when people decide whether they want to be a locum or not, they
Yeah.
have to decide in between being either self-employed or a limited company.
Yeah.
Now, we've kind of explored a little bit more about the limited company, but what does self-employed mean then? Is that like, because there's something called a sole trader, is that what
Yeah,
you
so as a self-employed individual, you register for a UTR number. So you'd have your own UTR number, self-employed individual. And all your business income as a locum would go into your own account. It can go into your personal account because you're self-employed. However, we do advise you that you open up a separate account just for your locum income to go in, especially if you are doing the mixing of employed and locuming. So then what you can do is you can say exactly what you've earned locuming, keep that separate, keep the expenses separate, which we'll discuss the allowable expenses shortly. Keep them all separate, and then it helps you just be able to plan better and save the tax ready for the taxes that will be due. So these different dates as well in terms of when those taxes are due, and they differ whether you are self-employed or a limited company.
Perfect. So do you know, like, if somebody came to you and said to you, look, Jess, I'm not too sure if I should become a sole trader or self-employed, or if I should set up a limited company.
Yeah.
How do they go about deciding what is the definitive factor?
So obviously a lot of clients come to us because they want to save tax, they want to do it the most tax efficient way. However, you've also got to look at your personal circumstances and where you are in your life. So, you know, on this call, there's a lot of just qualified individuals, so hopefully quite younger generation, which I'm guessing they still need to get the mortgages, they're still looking at marriage, they're still looking at, you know, living their life, buying their first house, going on holiday, you know, and enjoying their life. So if that's the case, then most people actually tend to go down the self-employed route now, as in not the limited company, purely because it means they've got access to their funds straight away, makes it easier for them to obtain a mortgage. So if they're looking at buying their first mortgage, you know, the mortgage companies are going to go by all the income that's gone as self-employed, whereas if you're a limited company, you can only go by what you've extracted as a dividend. So it makes it a little bit more difficult in terms of obtaining your first mortgage. Also, some people want to pay the student loans off. So, you know, if you're self-employed, then all your income is eligible for your student loan repayments at 9%, whereas if you're a limited company, it's slightly different. So some people's aim is get the student loan paid off, get the first mortgage, etc., etc. Other people come to us and they don't want that. They're happy with their employment income, and they want their locum income to be an investment. So if that was the case, then we definitely recommend being a limited company. So the money can go into the limited company, you can take advantage of the lower tax rates, you can build your locum money up in your limited company, and then look at how and where you want to invest that money. So it all depends on the individual, and we really do go into detail at the initial meeting and find out exactly where the individual is right now and where they want to be and what their goals are. Before we set them up. So, you know, right now, if they have just qualified, they've got time. If they have been locuming already, which I think some of them have, whatever income they've already made now would be self-employed up until you set your limited company up. So you can't backdate this. So if they are thinking of going limited, they have to do it now, and they have to get the bank account set up and everything set up ready to go forward as a limited company.
Perfect. So that time thing is quite precious, isn't it? Obviously,
yes,
particularly if there's certain things like some of you guys might have paid for your registration fees with the GPHC. Some of you might have paid for courses. You know, if you've got a limited company set up in time, then I'm guessing they put them down as expenses, can't they, Jess?
Yes. So all of their registration fees, training, initial setup can all go through the limited company as an expense.
Yeah.
And it can go as a self-employed expense as well.
Yeah.
So they're both allowable expenses.
Perfect. So I'm guessing what I'm gathering from what you mentioned there then, Jess, is that when they qualify, or a lot of these guys have qualified, once they've made their mind up of whether they want to be self-employed or employed, then really they need to have a chat with someone like yourself and present what matters to them the most for them to then be able to decide between sole trader and limited company. Is that, would you say that's like basically the initial?
There's no black and white answer. I mean, we can give you a rough idea. So in terms of taxes, for the average sort of 50k locum difference between self-employed and limited company, you're saving around £1,500, £2,000 being a limited company as opposed to self-employed. If you go in a bit further, so around 75k, the tax savings get a little bit more, but it all depends on how much you want to extract from your limited company. So if you can keep some money in the limited company, the tax savings can be greater. So then you could be looking at, 7.5k a year saving. But it all depends on the individual circumstances and how much they need right now as disposable income.
Yeah, perfect. So, I mean, the other thing that we're going to say then, Jess, is from what you've mentioned there, sole trader, in terms of setup, we've kind of covered quite well because it's just a matter of getting a bank account, getting the money in there.
Yeah, the key thing is you've got to register with HMRC.
Perfect.
You've got to register for a UTR number with HMRC. I definitely recommend getting a separate bank account. And then you're good to go then. You can prepare your invoices. So some people use bookkeeping software, some people will just use Excel or Word documents, or some people, the community pharmacists where they work, will already have a procedure for you to do the invoicing. A key thing that you've got to get right from the beginning, whether you're limited or self-employed, is your contracts. You've got to have a service contract in place. Now, I don't know whether they'll have heard of IR35. This is a key issue in HMRC at the moment, whether you are self-employed or employed. Now, one of the main features of being self-employed is you've got to have a contract of service in place. So, and it's got to have all the right things on there to ensure that you're not employed and HMRC cannot challenge you as being employed. Because, in the future, if HMRC were to challenge all of that income that you've earned as employment income, then it'd be up to you to pay that tax and national insurance as if you were employed. So you have to ensure you've got all these key things in place.
Most certainly. So I'm guessing we mentioned the unique tax reference number and, setting up a separate account, etc. That's the kind of stuff that you would be quite useful in advising on as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so we can help do that and register them for self-assessment, and also register a limited company if they wanted to go down that route as well.
Perfect. Now I've got some questions coming on the chat, and I'm going to try and link it in with a question that I've got, and then I'm going to direct it to that question. So I've got a bit of a triangulated approach. I feel like we've covered sole trader quite well. Let's talk about limited in now, if we can, and then I can also tie in one of the questions we've got. So with a limited company, you say that you have to see it as a separate business, and you've got to get a business bank account. So let's just start afresh. Limited company.
Yeah.
How do I go about setting it up? What would you need? If I said to you, Jess, I want a limited company, then, that sounds right for me. What would you want from me, and how would I create a company?
Okay, so we can incorporate the company for you, first of all. And what we'd need from you is we'd need an idea of the name that you're thinking, so we can see if it's available. Then we'd need your ID documents, we'd need your full name, address, date of birth, national insurance number. As a limited company, you have what's called a registered office, and this is the address that is online for everyone to see. So what we usually advise is use our address as the serviced address in the registered office, so that when people are going online looking at they don't see your home personal address. So we do offer the registered office service as well here. So once we've got all of that information, we can go ahead and set up your limited company. You'll then get what's called a certificate of incorporation, and it'll have an 8-digit company number, and that is your limited company, that's your company number. You then take that information to then go and open up your bank account. So you cannot open your bank account with that certificate of incorporation. So you have to get that first, and then you can go ahead and open up your bank account.
Perfect. So your bank account people, or the bank itself, will say to you, sorry, we can't set you up a limited company until you've got that certificate to say.
Because there's nothing to set up. There's no company to set up without that. So you have to have that in place. It's got to have all the right details on there. So as a limited company, you'd be the director of your limited company. So, and then you'd also have to say who the shareholders of the limited company are. So you'd be the 100% shareholder of your limited company, so that you can extract your dividends. So if you're not a shareholder, you can't receive dividends. So it's all about getting all of these things set up correctly in the first instance, and then you're ready to go and start running a limited company then.
And I've heard some horror stories before, Jess, when people have thought, you know what, I've got a pharmacy degree, I know how to set up a company, I'll go do it myself, and then they've messed up the shares and they've got to start from scratch. Is that something that you come across quite often?
Yeah, so obviously, so people they go and try and set a limited company up themselves, but they don't really understand what it is. So, you know, some people don't understand that to get dividends, you have to be a shareholder. They think that I'll just be a director and that means I can receive dividends, or they add other people on there. So that you've also got to add the correct PSCs as well now on a limited company and allocate those as well. So, you know, you can try and do it online yourself, or you can appoint us to do the limited company. If you already have set up a limited company, for some of the newly qualified locums here today, and you have made mistakes, it can be corrected. So we can fix that if we find that, you know, it's not quite right, the setup that you've done at the moment. We can look at it and we can rectify it without completely changing and setting up another limited company. So don't worry, we can look at that and correct anything that you've done.
Perfect. So obviously now I'll set up a limited company through you guys. I've got my bank account, etc. I'm interested in how am I going to get paid? Yeah, how am I going to, you know, spend my money basically? What do I do? So I go into a pharmacy, or I go into a, I don't know, a GP practice, wherever I'm working. I do my shift. I send them an invoice of some sort.
Yep.
And then they pay into my business account.
Yep.
How do I get the money? How do I get the money out of the business account then? Like, how do I spend it?
Yes, so this is when it really goes into your personal individual circumstances. So I'm just going to explain first of all, let's just say you're just a limited company, you're just locum in, that's all you're doing. So in that instance, you'd probably set up yourself with a director's salary. And this is where you can take advantage of the tax savings here. So this is where you'd put yourself on £1,000 director's salary, or just under the tax-free allowance. You'd pay yourself that each month, and the rest you draw out as what are called dividends. So dividends are subject to a lower tax rate. At the moment, the first £1,000 dividends tax-free, and then the rest is taxable. So it depends on how much you need to extract. So if you can keep it to the 50k mark, this is when a limited company is really advantageous, because you know you're paying tax at the lower bracket. However, if you need more than that, that's when we look at different ways of extracting the funds. So it all depends on individual circumstances. If you've got the mixed scenario, so you're already employed, you're already taking your tax-free allowance via your employment income, so then you'd more than likely you wouldn't be on a director's salary via a limited company, and you'd just be extracting it via dividends. So what we usually do is we'd have a conversation right at the beginning, and then we'd advise you exactly how to extract your money. So you'd also want to ensure that in your limited bank account, you've got all the expenses set up out of there. For example, your mobile phone bill, your insurance, any subscriptions, mileage as well. So we'd ensure that you're taking advantage of all the allowable expenses, and then that would mean that you'd need less income in your personal account, because you've already taken care of these expenses that are allowable.
So things like you said, mobile phone, you said mileage. Is there anything like food as well? Like, for example, like I'm going out to work.
Yep.
Can I pay myself for that? Could I pay myself for my laptop because I'm using it to do bookkeeping?
So in terms of the expenses, food is a tricky one. So HMRC do say that if, for example, you're trying to put through lunch, but you'd normally be eating lunch anyway in working hours, then there can be a bit of a grey area. So HMRC, it's usually if you're traveling quite far, you're stopping in a hotel, for example, to be able to get to work on time, and you're away from home for a number of hours. So if it's just your normal dinner, what you'd normally be eating, HMRC can challenge that. So we do tend to advise you to be careful with food. It is allowable if you're stopping over, or if you're away from home for more than 12 hours. But if you end up locuming quite close to home, and the shifts are quite short, then probably not. But we would go through that with you in more detail.
Perfect. So I'm going to have a look at some of the questions in the chat, because obviously the thing is, I'm guessing you will get lots and lots and lots of questions. Some of them will be a lot more complex as well. But I think at this stage, with what the kind of people that we've got on the call today, 0 to 6 months, is kind of the right kind of questions and the discussions that we've been having so far. So one of the questions that I've got then in the chat is asking about what happens to the limited company if someone was to set one up today, they were to do their locum work, but then a year, few years, few months down the line, they get an employed job, and now they don't want that company anymore, or now they don't really work for that company. Do they close down? Do they still have to do accounting every year? Do they stay open? What's the sketch with that?
Yeah, so once you've got the limited company set up and you've got the bank account, obviously everything's quite new right now. So you might do locum in for a month or two, and then you might decide, you know what, it's not for me. However, it doesn't mean it's not going to be for you forever. So what you could do is you'd have to do your first year of accounts and file those. But then what you could do is you could do what's called dormant accounts. So you could leave the company open, the bank account open. You've got everything set up. You've done all that set up. So let's just leave that for now. The year after, you could file dormant accounts. So they're just a set of accounts where nothing's happened. The fee for those is quite negligible. I think it's around £50 plus VAT for the year. And then you've still got all the setups. So let's say in 2 years' time, let's say you wanted to do it. You've got everything set up. There's nothing really to do. You can just go live and set it up, or you've got all that there. If you decide, you know what, no, I 100%, I'm never going back to locum, I hate it, I want everything closed down, then you can do that. So you can submit a form, you'd file your accounts up to the point that you stop trading, and then you can file a form and close that limited company down, close the bank account, and everything will be closed down.
Fantastic. And on the flip side to that question is somebody asking, I've completed a few locum shifts, but I haven't set up a limited company yet. I will do soon. Am I being a bit too risky here, is the question.
No, so what you're doing is you're testing the water, you're seeing how it's working for you. If you've done a few locum shifts already, it's self-employed, so it'll go on your personal self-assessment tax return. You can't say, oh, I'm going to put that money into a limited company, now it's limited company money. Whatever you've done already is done. So then you'd look at setting up the limited company, and then any shifts going forward would form part of the limited company money.
So do you know, like, let's just say this person has done almost 4 weeks, if not 6 weeks of work. They've they've earned about 7-8K.
Yep.
Do they just keep it? Or are they going to get in trouble? Do they have to tell somebody about it? Because
so you do have to tell somebody about it. So that would go as self-assessment income. So it'd go on your self-assessment tax return. So if you're employed as well, you'll have your P60 on your tax return, and then you'd have that money on there as well, and then you'd pay the tax. So if your income is still less than 50K, you'd pay the 20% tax, and also the national insurance on that as well. So you'd pay that. So if you're doing it right now, your tax year is 23-24. So the tax for that income, that small amount of income that you've received so far, would be due by the 31st of January 25. So it's still due. So do still account for at least 20% on what you've earned so far, and you declare it in next year's tax return.
Perfect. And obviously, there are some other questions in the chat. I'm going to pick 1 or 2 others for us to elaborate on. I think you've answered some of them anyway. One of them, which was, can I put the money into my personal account initially? You've mentioned that you can, self-assessment tax, etc. So the other question that I'm going to pick on, there's a little bit about IR35, but I think IR35 gets really complicated. There's lots of stuff online anyway to explain it. I would probably say, when we've had this discussion, I'm going to bring up a form on the screen, a QR code. I'd like for you guys to scan that and then send through queries, and we can get that sent through to Jess as well. But the last question I'm going to ask you, Jess, before I round off, because I wanted to, focus a little bit more on how you can help as well in relation to that. But the last question is that somebody's asking, I think this one might be a case-by-case basis type kind of question, in fact. So they've got a limited company working for a pharmacy chain. That pharmacy chain doesn't want to pay into the business account. So does that now mean that this person has to open up a personal account, a sole trader? Is this more of a thing that they need to take to their indemnity provider because the person's been a bit too funny. I don't know what's the situation with that. So do some businesses have reservations of paying money into a business account?
No, they shouldn't do, unless they're trying to say that it's IR35 income, and therefore it should be paid into your personal account. So it depends, because if you are a locum, it's up to you how you locum. So, you're well in your right to locum as a limited company or as a self-employed locum. If just double check that they're not trying to say we want to tax you under IR35. If they're not taxing you via IR35 and they're paying you gross, then you are well in your right to receive your money any way you want to receive your money. So I would look into that a little bit further and see why they're not happy to pay you into your limited bank account.
Yeah, it does sound a bit unusual, doesn't it? Because from what I'm working, normally people tend to be fine, and there might be that IR35.
Yeah, I think it most likely will be an IR35 issue.
Yeah, cool. So obviously we've talked a lot today, Jess. I'm guessing we could talk for ages. Probably could.
Yeah, it's
So much
quite a
today.
large subject. We're trying to squeeze it all in half an hour, but
Yeah. So I was going to ask you then. So I've got a QR code set up with your details on, so that if they wanted to get into contact, they can. But what is the situation then? So obviously they're going to scan the QR code and they fill in their details. But because these guys have taken out the time on a Sunday morning, what kind of have they got any offers coming up, or is there anything that you can help with? Because these guys are keen, they want to get signed up, they want to be on the right side of law, they want to do everything right. Some of them might have other commitments, personal commitments, like your mortgage, weddings, whatever. So once they scan the QR code, what kind of things, what can they expect from you guys at Isaacs then? Because that's probably more of a question, I guess, that you can answer than I would be able.
Yeah, so hopefully you do scan the QR code, and we can get in touch. So the first thing would be we'd have an initial meeting, we'd go through things, and then we'd be able to advise you a more bespoke option on what suits you. Because you've joined this webinar today, and you've taken your time out on a Sunday morning, we will be looking at doing a 10% reduction if they do it through you and through the QR code on our fees. So you'll be able to take advantage of a 10% discount for your first year accountancy fees as well.
Perfect. So I'm going to bring that code up on the screen then. So here's a code. Feel free to scan that. Like I say, there's lots of other questions that you guys have got that are personalized as well. So if you can scan that QR code, that should take you directly to a Microsoft form. And then all I want on that is your details and any questions that you might have. And then I can forward that on to Jess as well. But yeah, I do hope you guys found that useful. We've got a couple of more minutes and there are a few of the things that I wanted to talk about. But Jess, before we do round off, is there anything further that you feel we should have discussed and that these guys need to be aware of?
Well, there's lots and lots to discuss, really. So there's a lot more in terms of expenses that could go through. Another thing I did want to touch base on was VAT, which has been highly talked about at the moment in terms of locums and VAT. So that's a key thing if you are thinking of locuming full time and working a lot of hours, you are going to get to that VAT threshold in terms of income, which is £87,000 a year. At the moment, we are, we do advise you are locum, you're providing healthcare. So you are exempt from VAT. However, it does become a bit of a grey area if you're trading via a limited company. So again, it's getting those key things in place first to cover and ensure that you don't get caught by any sort of VAT issues or IR35 issues as well. So, but these are all things that we can discuss further on a one-on-one. It all depends on your personal circumstances.
Perfect. Well, thank you ever so much for joining on the call today, Jess. I'm going to just go through a few other points with these guys as well. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Maybe we can set up another one later on and talk a little bit more about expenses.
Any sort of key questions that are coming in, like you say, especially with the IR35, we can maybe do one in a little bit more detail into the specific questions that they're wanting.
Okay. I'm asking another quick question. You can see the QR code, can't you, Jess?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much, Jess. Then I'm going to go through the last few points then, guys, before we round off. Just some further points for you to be aware of. Do make sure you give that QR code a scan. We'll try and send it out via email as well, the form, and on the relevant WhatsApp groups. So last few points then, like I said, thank you for joining today, guys. The last few points that I'd like to highlight. So lots of other things that we've got coming up with Pharmacy Foundations. You guys obviously joined the session today. You've been part of the Pharmacy Foundations community as part of your undergrad or your foundation training, etc. So do make sure you are keeping a lookout. The kind of things that we've got coming up in the next few weeks and months are going to be early careers series. So that's going to be how to get into academia, general practice, community, hospital, and portfolio roles. So do make sure you check that out on our socials. We've also brought back our general practice and PCNs essentials portfolio. A lot of you guys are wanting to move into general practice or a PCN role, and time again, you're getting asked, well, have you got the relevant experience? So what we're going to do is we're going to relaunch our general practice and PCN course, which basically will give you, some opportunity to practice all the different types of activities that would be expected from you as a general practice / PCN pharmacist. And you will do that in a simulated environment. So at the end of it, you'll get a nice certificate, and some of the agencies and employers do recognize our work within this area. So that should hopefully bump you up the list if you are trying to get into these general practice / PCN roles. And going in hand with that, and to be fair, also links in community pharmacy, is the advanced clinical examination skills, where we obviously teach you some of the more advanced assessment skills that you need to be aware of if you're running any advanced practice or minor ailment clinics in general practice, as well as some of the more new Pathfinder type independent prescribing services in community pharmacy. So all of that stuff's going to go onto our website. Some of it's already on there. I think we had a bit of an issue last night with the website. So if you've got any further queries or you can't see what you want to see, then drop us a message on our social media. As before, social media channels listed here for you. So if you are on these platforms, give us a follow or a like, etc. And as before, we are also on our WhatsApp support groups. Lots of different types of WhatsApp groups, depends on when you are qualified. You just let us know and we can put you into the right group. Thank you ever so much, guys, for joining today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to end the session there. And if you have got any further questions, please use our WhatsApp support groups and the social media. Until next time, see you later.